Chapter 141, Section 141. Eh? Eh? Captain Aizen, are you really going to wait until this inventory footage exposes our future defection and then all defect at once? That's wicked! Ichimaru Gin fanned the flames of the moment deliberately. Jin, Aizen turned slowly. He glanced at Ichimaru with the same unreadable face and said in a low, even voice, "If it's exposed in advance, and the Gotei 13 still can't stop us from leaving the Soul Society, wouldn't that only prove their foolishness and incompetence?" His tone was flat, full of contempt for the Gotei 13. The secondary damage from such a result would be even harder for the Shinigami to accept, wouldn't it? At the same time, while the Seirete simmered in the gloom of arresting traitors, the inventory footage continued to play. The scene shifted. Now it was above Sokyoku Hill. "Abarai Renji, put Kuchiki Rukia down, then step back." The image hadn't frozen. Aizen's cold, commanding voice cut through the recording. The camera panned slowly, and Abarai Renji's face filled the screen, stunned, blank with shock and confusion. "Captain, Aizen, aren't you supposed to be dead? Why are you?" Renji's hand loosened. He nearly dropped Rukia, who was dressed in white prison garb and wore the same expression of utter bewilderment. The sight struck a certain red-haired Shinigami, who had been about to head for the 5th Division to effect an arrest, with sudden panic. "No way! Am I crazy? Why is Rukia in prison clothes, and why am I holding her while facing Aizen alone?" Renji, passing the barracks entrance, caught the footage out of the corner of his eye. His pupils shrank. Cold sweat broke out. The memory of Toshiro Hitsugaya being cut down with a single strike still burned in his mind. How could anyone dare stand against Aizen? What made him more desperate was what his future self did next. Renji on the screen refused Aizen's command, drew his Zanpakuto, and hurled himself at Aizen from a distance. "You're insane, insane! My future self must be insane!" He felt like shouting, but his cries couldn't reach the past, or change what fate had already shown. The recording's cold voice continued. "Abarai Renji, persistence is a virtue, but excessive stubbornness is simply overestimating oneself." Aizen's figure moved faster than the camera could follow. He was suddenly behind Renji, and a pillar of blood exploded more than 10 meters into the air. "What?" Another strike! Another captain-level Shinigami, killed by Aizen in one blow. No, the camera couldn't even track him. We couldn't see the swing, and Captain Abarai was already down. Terrified exclamations swept throughout the Gotei 13. The image showed Renji collapsing into a spreading pool of blood. Officers and seated squad members trembled. One captain slain with each strike. Aizen's power, casual and brutal, was devastating and unmistakable. The slaughter did not stop. Fear spread again as Aizen walked toward Kuchiki Rukia. "Kuchiki Rukia, if I take the Hogyoku sealed inside you, we can return to Hueco Mundo naturally." Inside the 1st Division barracks, Chojiro Sasakibe's face went slack with disbelief. He had, like everyone else, assumed Kira Izuru was Aizen's accomplice after that chase in the court. But now, was Kira wrongly accused, or is Aizen's true accomplice someone else? The camera shifted, and the two figures flanking Aizen came into view, both wearing Captain Haori, Ichimaru Gin, Tosin Kaname. In an instant, despair detonated through the entire Gotei 13. The revelation that two sitting captains stood beside Aizen shattered hope. Spiritual pressure erupted anew from the 1st Division. Ryujin Jaka's power, fueled by the captain commander's boundless fury, tore a vast hole through the already damaged ceiling of the squad office. Black smoke poured out, the air filled with the acrid stench of burning. The traitors had not yet rampaged or inflicted substantial damage, but the captain commander's wrath alone reduced the 1st Division barracks to chaos time and again. Bastards! So on that final battlefield in Karakura Town, the ones sealed by my Jokaku Enjo were the 3 of them. The captain commander's face, lined and fierce with rage, was no longer kind. Although he'd steeled himself, the true exposure of Aizen's accomplices sent a storm roaring through his heart. Ichimaru Gin, Tosin Kaname, Aizen Sosuke. These 3, apparently colleagues but rarely interacting, had always been rumored to be at odds, especially Ichimaru, who had openly provoked Aizen in meetings. Now it was clear that those conflicts were a facade, a deliberate pretense crafted by the 3 to deceive the entire Seirete and hold the Gotei 13 in the palm of their hands. "Captain Commander, please calm your anger." Section 142. Regarding the true identities of Ichimaru Gin and Tosen Kaname, I've already informed all the captains through Tenkei Okoro. They'll surely arrest Aizen and those two criminals. Chojiro Sasakibe reported respectfully. Right now, the 1st Division barracks was ablaze. If the fire continued unchecked, Aizen might not even be restrained, and the whole place could be reduced to ashes. The captain commander had to control his rage. The captain commander murmured. Well done, Chojiro. I hope the Shinigami won't disappoint this old man. Lowering his eyes slightly, he managed to rein in his anger and stop releasing spiritual pressure. The flames around the 1st Division subsided a little. Still, he had no intention of intervening personally. Part of it was pride. His identity as the strongest Shinigami in 1,000 years made him instinctively maintain composure. Acting rashly would undermine his authority. Part of it was trust, in the captains of the Gotei 13, whom he believed could handle Aizen and his accomplices. That faith held, until what came next forced him to regret that confidence. On the video, Renji Abarai collapsed to the ground, unconscious. At the edge of a growing pool of blood, the white prison uniform trembled violently. Kuchiki Rukia, utterly terrified and mentally blank, curled up and shook on the ground. Facing Aizen, who held his Zanpakuto in one hand and walked toward her with quiet grace, Rukia's fear and despair drained every color from her face. She closed her eyes, giving up the struggle. Then, just as the air on Sokyoku Hill felt solid with suffocating dread, the situation flipped again. Aizen! A beast-like roar split the air, followed by an enormous figure descending from the sky and landing hard behind Aizen, smashing into the ground. Boom! Dust flew, cracks spidered across the earth, and the video camera shuddered. This is... All who watched leaned in. Emerging through the dust was the familiar golden metal helmet, Komamura Sajin. The sight of him at Sokyoku Hill, first to arrive to stop Aizen, lit a new spark of hope among the Shinigami of the Gotei 13. Komamura had always been wrapped in mystery, a perpetually concealed face, a massive, oppressive presence. Lower-ranking Shinigami had long feared him. Now, at the moment Aizen seemed poised to take the Hogyoku, Komamura stepping forward rekindled their hopes. Could he stop Aizen? Aizen halted and turned slowly, a faint smile playing on his lips. Oh, Captain Komamura, I didn't expect you to be the first to arrive. Aizen! Komamura roared, swinging his Zanpakuto in rage. After all you've done, don't you feel any remorse? His strike launched. Komamura had made his move. Across the ranks, countless Shinigami held their breath. For many, this strike from the towering captain was a test of belief. If Aizen could dismiss Komamura as he had the others, their faith would collapse. In a century, 3 captains had never been felled in quick succession. Then the bitter truth arrived. Aizen, with an expression unchanged, raised his bare hand. Exploding in rage at the slightest disagreement, he said, his voice flat and pitying. Even after becoming a captain, you still can't change the inherently bad temper of an animal. How pathetic. No one had expected him to catch the attack with his bare fingers. Gasps flooded the viewing ranks. Aizen pinched the blade of Komamura's Zanpakuto between 2 fingers and intercepted it with ease. Komamura, his weapon seized, could not force it forward another inch. His spiritual pressure and attack seemed to be siphoned away, evaporating. From beneath the metal helmet came a disbelieving cry. Komamura tried to pull his Zanpakuto back, but it only remained trapped between Aizen's fingers. This is too much, the thoughtless helplessness registered on his face. Inside the 1st Division office, Chojiro Sasakibe stood frozen before the transparent screen. Aizen had already defeated several captains with a single strike. Now he was subduing a captain with 2 fingers. Even watching the footage, the sight was so unreal that Chojiro's knees buckled and he slowly sank to his knees. Behind him, the captain commander's stern face, so seldom altered, went pale with shock. "Oh no," he muttered. Despite the painful reluctance in his heart, the captain commander spoke the brutal truth. "I underestimated Aizen. The combined strength of those captains, they cannot contend with him. Impossible." Komamura, voice frantic beneath his helmet, strained against the crushing power transmitted through the blade trapped in Aizen's fingers. The suppressive force of Aizen's spiritual pressure immobilized him, despite Komamura's immense size and strength. In the footage, the sight was almost mocking. Komamura's massive body, usually so imposing, now seemed like a plush toy brandishing a small knife, every motion controlled by Aizen's 2 fingers, like a puppet. Aizen looked up with indifferent calm, his glasses catching the light. "Why ask such a strange question?" he said, voice flat, "as if you had ever seen my full power." Then, without hesitation, Aizen invoked a spell. Hado number 90, Kurohitsugi. He cast the Hado without incantation. The sound that issued through the recap video, conveyed with special audio clarity, struck like a magnitude 10 earthquake. Inside the 5th division. What? Hado 90 Kurohitsugi? Aizen can use a legendary Hado so smoothly, without incantation. But inside the 5th division barracks, more than a dozen captains, hundreds of high-ranking officers, and thousands of executive militia watched the light screen in stunned silence. Every eye was fixed on the Aizen in the captain's office, now locked in combat with the Shinigami captains led by Zaraki Kenpachi. Expressions shifted as a single terrible thought spread through the room. Something was wrong. If Aizen had already mastered legendary Kido, why, during his arrest, had he only defended himself with his Zanpakuto and words? No Shikai, no Bankai, no Kido at all, only his spiritual pressure, and even that barely matched the force coming at him. The man being surrounded by the captains showed almost no ability to fight back. This was not the Aizen shown in the review video. "Captain Unohana, what's happening? This keeps getting stranger," Isane Kotetsu murmured, eyes seeking reassurance from Retsu Unohana. Unohana's face was calm as she watched the battle on the screen. "Isane, I know what you're thinking," she said quietly. "For now, whether by sight, by Reiatsu sensing, or by Lieutenant Hinamori Momo's testimony, everything proves the man surrounded is Aizen Sosuke himself." They had set a trap in the 5th division, and despite Hinamori's desperate protests, had kept her out to record her testimony. Her evidence, time, place, alibi, was clear. Aizen had not left the 5th division even a single step. In other words, the Aizen being surrounded by the captains was the real man. "But Ichimaru Gin and Tosen Kaname are missing," Isane added timidly, glancing around. "Wouldn't they have acted together if they were accomplices? It's odd that they're both absent." Her gaze flicked back to the review video. There, Aizen stood about to cast Kurohitsugi without an incantation, with Gin and Tosen behind him, watching. Her scalp prickled. The live scene in the video painted 2 completely different pictures, one showing Aizen trapped and bleeding, the other showing him overwhelmingly powerful, flanked by 2 captain-level allies, suppressing Komamura Sajin with 2 fingers and unleashing a legendary Kido without words. Asane couldn't tell which was real anymore. Inside the captain's office, Zaraki Kenpachi's roar cut the uncertainty. "What the hell? Aizen, is that all you've got? That video made you look far more interesting." Golden Reiatsu swirled around Kenpachi, heavy and brutal, and his slash drove toward the injured Aizen. The force was so great it cleared the air in the room. The wooden floor beneath them cracked under the sword pressure. "I've been framed," the man in front of Kenpachi gasped, blood streaking his face. Under his black-rimmed glasses, his eyes shifted from calm and confident to panicked. As he stammered, one lens of his glasses shattered under the incoming sword pressure. The sight of him, broken, frightened, made it impossible to reconcile with the composed, commanding figure in the review video. But Kenpachi, whose fighting style was pure, brutal offense, paid no heed to subtleties. His sword pressure did not lessen. "Is it over?" Kyoraku Shunsui murmured from nearby, his expression unreadable. He had engaged only to prevent Aizen from escaping, leaving the main attacks to Soifan, Kenpachi, Kuchiki Byakuya, and Toshiro Hitsugaya. He watched the former colleague he once admired, Aizen, who'd been a model for others, fall in such a degenerate way, and felt nothing but regret. "I hope Captain Kenpachi leaves him alive," Jushiro Ukitake said, frowning. "Jin and Tosen are missing. The Gotei 13 is still in grave danger." He, like Kyoraku, remained on guard for any sign of intervention. "It's too late," Kyoraku said bluntly. "With those injuries, once that sword pressure hits, his chance of survival is slim." He shook his head. Capturing Aizen alive would have been preferable, but executing the traitor and crushing this supposed defection was also a massive victory. Then a cry rose from the crowd. "Look, Kurohitsugi, cast without an incantation, has been released." The cry shattered the frozen tension and drew everyone back to the light screen. The scene in the review video dimmed, and then exploded. Aizen's Reiatsu surged into a vast flow, the air shrieking as it coalesced into an endless storm of black shadow blades. A huge square, coffin-like barrier, Kurohitsugi, materialized, carrying the stench of decay and death, framing Komamura Sajin from top to bottom. Even without an incantation, Hado 90 had the power to change the world's colors. What was stranger still was the simultaneity of it all. As Kenpachi's golden sword pressure in the present struck through the Aizen in the captain's office, the black coffin in the video, pulsing with annihilating energy, enveloped Komamura Sajin at the same instant. It was as if future and present were moving in lockstep. A golden sword pressure and a dark barrier, released at the same moment in different spaces. Two Aizens, one taking the blow, one on the offensive, appeared to be acting in tandem across realities. "It's over, Aizen!" Kenpachi snarled, grinning as the golden light from his attack flared so bright it stained the eye patch over his other eye. Inside the black coffin barrier on the screen, countless shadow blades, as if piercing through past and future, carried a tornado of Reiatsu that shredded Komamura's body from all sides. The first thing to go was his metal knight helm. It shattered with a thunderous crash. When the helmet broke, Komamura's badly wounded canine face was exposed. "Nani!" rang out, a shocked cry, as vast rents in his armor sprayed thin streams of blood. His mane was stained, his eyes swollen and drooping. Severely injured, the giant warrior staggered under wounds that poured out blood. Inside the 5th Division barracks, hundreds of Shinigami cried out in astonishment. All at once they turned their heads, their shocked gazes fixed on the figure in the squad room, the massive form who had fought beside Zaraki Kenpachi, who had jointly besieged and killed Aizen. No way. Captain Komamura is actually an animal? 7th Division Vice Captain Iba Tetsuzumon stared in horror at the familiar shape before him. His throat tightened, and all the moisture seemed to drain away. It wasn't that he meant to offend, he didn't look down on animals, but the news was so sudden that anyone would be stunned if they hadn't seen it with their own eyes. To any Shinigami, becoming a Soul Reaper is already a 1 in 100 fate. To rise through the ranks of the Gotei 13 and claim a captaincy is like becoming a dragon among men, talent, perseverance, character, and luck all required. Who would have expected a Shinigami captain, venerated throughout Soul Society, not to be a human soul-turned-Shinigami at all, but a gigantic canine of the wolf tribe? The revelation was staggering. "Ah, the surprises just keep on coming," Kyoraku Shinsui murmured with a wry smile, rubbing the back of his head. He tried to keep an open mind, but even he found it hard to accept at first. In his memory, Komamura had been a sunny, stalwart, honorable knight. This was not what he'd imagined. Jushiro Ukitake, standing beside him, made no joke. He stared at the transparent screen, projecting the footage. As the massive black coffin vanished, Komamura lay unconscious and gravely wounded, his enormous canine body barely clinging to life in a pool of blood. His fate was uncertain. Ukitake's face drained of color. "Even a Kurohitsugi without incantation can instantly kill a captain-class Shinigami?" he breathed. "Just how much has Aizen's Reiatsu grown?" He was filled with an inarticulate awe. The gap between captains and the rest was like an abyss, and what chilled him most was a pattern emerging. From the Central 46 to the Seirete, now at Sokyoku Hill, Aizen had been able to kill captain-level opponents with a single move. The only difference was how the victims fell. Aizen, has he become so powerful he can decide the manner of his enemies' deaths? Ukitake's breath caught. That kind of strength, even among the captains, was like none other. Ryujin Jaka, famed for its overwhelming fiery power, now seemed less terrifying than Aizen's casual theatrical method of killing. As Ukitake reeled, the footage continued. After easily defeating Komamura, Aizen used a prepared technique, the soul foreign object extraction, and removed a clear Hogyoku from Rukyakuchiki's body. The moment the Hogyoku appeared, shock rippled through the Soul Reaper world. "Oh ho ho ho!" Urahara Kisuke fanned himself with his folding fan and let out a bitter laugh. Every word carried undeniable shock and helplessness. Long ago, he had sealed the Hogyoku and hidden it, ultimately choosing Rukia as its container. The method of extracting the Hogyoku had been buried in the vast stacks of the Great Spirit Library. Who could have imagined that, despite every precaution, Aizen would one day find it? He had tried to forget the Hogyoku over the years, to leave it out of mind, but seeing the footage of Aizen taking it, witnessing it with his own eyes, made Urahara grind his teeth in hatred. He wished he could travel to the future and stop Aizen. No wonder so many Arrancar appeared, Kurosaki Ishin said, understanding instantaneously. In his recollection, Arrancar had been rare in Hueco Mundo. Self-Arrancarization was the domain of the strongest Menos Grande, the Vasto Lord. But now Arrancar seemed as common as cabbages. The recent Arrancar invasion had already included 3 Espada and numerous Fraction, far more than normal. No, Urahara shook his head, solemn. Before he took my Hogyoku, Aizen already had an incomplete Hogyoku in his possession. The half-finished Arrancar in Hueco Mundo now. They were likely created by that incomplete Hogyoku. He drew a breath and spoke slowly, emphasizing each word. Including you and me, all of the Shinigami of the Gotei 13, we underestimated Aizen's power, his ambition, his intelligence and strategy. What we've seen is only the tip of the iceberg. Aizen's true horror has not yet been revealed. In the 5th Division's underground secret room, after the Hogyoku's exposure, Aizen watched the entire extraction process unfold with calm satisfaction. As the crystal orb materialized, a faint, pleased smile curved his lips. Then he turned and walked toward the exit. "Gin, Kaname, let's go," he said. "It's time to reveal ourselves and applaud the Shinigami's performance." 5th Division, Squad Room. It's completely over. It looks like Aizen should be dead, right? Zaraki Kenpachi held his Zanpakuto, its chipped blade dripping blood. He looked down at the figure in the nearby cracked pit. Aizen, almost split in two by his sword pressure, motionless and apparently lifeless, and spoke loudly, his voice full of confidence, echoing the boast he had made before leaving the 11th Division. "Aizen's head. I, Zaraki Kenpachi, will take it." As a combat division captain, Zaraki Kenpachi had fulfilled the arrest mission perfectly. He'd become the single decisive force among all the personnel involved in encircling and killing Aizen. His wild, beast-like fighting style made the other Shinigami's eyelids twitch. When Kenpachi turned, everyone instinctively stepped aside. The crowd opened a clear path. No one dared restrain the king of brute force. Although the method was brutal and we couldn't leave him alive, Aizen can now only scheme in hell, Sufeng said, releasing her Zanpakuto from Shikai. The bee-sting gauntlet on her right hand folded back into blade form. She just used Suzumabachi's death in 2 steps. She had engraved the same black butterfly mark repeatedly on Aizen's front and back, locking onto and verifying the authenticity of his spiritual pressure. After Sufeng checked, the person Kenpachi killed was indeed the genuine Aizen. Even though Aizen is dead, something still feels wrong. Toshiro Hitsugaya frowned, staring down at the body labeled Aizen 943. In his head replayed the footage from the Central 46 chamber. Aizen felled in an instant by a single strike. That Aizen was always composed, his barbed words aimed to wound. Yet during the encirclement just now, Aizen hadn't taunted. He tried to explain and defend himself, and his calm, all-knowing composure was gone. His eyes and his aura had been unfamiliar, and yet the corpse had the exact appearance and spiritual pressure of Aizen, a fact repeatedly confirmed by multiple captains. It couldn't be faked. So where was the discrepancy? "Captain, don't overthink it. Captain Retsu Unohana is about to examine the body," Matsumoto Rangiku said, subtly jerking her chin toward the doorway. Outside the division office, the crowd parted automatically as the 4th Division's seated officers and Lieutenant Isane Kotetsu escorted Retsu Unohana in. She moved with downcast, solemn eyes. After nodding to the captains, she had her subordinates lay a white shroud over the body and began a careful autopsy. The procedure wasn't complicated. Unohana examined the spiritual energy flow between the Saketsu and Hakusui to determine whether the body before them was a true soul or a Gigai substitute meant to deceive. Time ticked away, minute after minute. Though the clock moved normally, the wait felt endless to those present. The division office was so quiet a pin could be heard. Only soft breathing punctuated the silence. No one wanted to disturb Unohana's work. "Captain, there shouldn't be any problem, right?" Izani asked in a low voice, half crouched by the body. With Unohana's medical skill, an autopsy normally wouldn't take long. Given that the deceased was Aizen, history's most cunning criminal in the Gotei 13, a little extra caution was expected. But Unohana's next words changed every face in the room. "Something's not right," she said slowly. The air in the office froze as if in a millennium-old ice cave. "What? Captain Unohana, what do you mean?" No one, not even a captain, dared to question Unohana. In the healing arts, she was unrivaled. Centuries of experience had made her an unquestioned authority. She looked down, her gaze sweeping over the body. Her lips parted, and she spoke plainly. "As you all know," she said, "since I became 4th Division captain, I've identified and treated countless bodies and injuries. With thousands of years of medical experience, I can usually identify any human anatomy and organs with a brief examination." But her delicate brows drew like crescent moons. Unohana raised her voice so it carried beyond the office and into the 5th Division barracks. "On the surface, this body shows no abnormalities. The saketsu, the hakusui, the organs, everything appears normal. The spiritual power remaining in the veins matches Aizen's. Yet," she paused, searching for the right words. "During the autopsy, I did not feel the familiar, corpse-like sensation. It felt as if I were touching something else entirely." She looked out the window toward the 5th Division barracks, unease in her voice. "To be frank, I cannot, with absolute certainty, confirm that this body is Aizen." Her words hit like a thunderclap. A riot of shocked whispers erupted. "What?" The body's appearance, its traits, its spiritual pressure, all matched Aizen. The autopsy found no abnormalities, and the possibility of a jigai had been ruled out. And yet Unohana couldn't positively identify it? Silence crushed the room again as everyone absorbed the implication. Many opened their mouths to argue, but Unohana's solemn expression swallowed their words. In medical matters, no one present could challenge her. There was no sign she was lying. "Captain Unohana, are you certain?" Kyoraku Shunsui asked, suppressing the shock in his voice as he stepped forward to maintain order. "Yes," she said, slowly shaking her head. "Everything I said just now reflects my true impressions during the autopsy." Shunsui fell silent. If Unohana's tone was that firm, then her judgment was most likely correct. If the early inventory footage had been exposed, had they all been fooled by Aizen once more? A chill crawled over Shunsui's spine. Dread tightened in his chest. Then, without warning, applause rang out from the empty path that had opened for Kenpachi. "Clap, clap, clap! Captain Retsu Unohana? A brilliant deduction. I didn't expect you to detect the flaw in 5-sense hypnosis through intuition, truly worthy of being the former first-generation Kenpachi." The unexpected clapping and the praise for Unohana made everyone's blood run cold. They turned toward the source of the sound, forcing down their unease, and at the same time their faces went ashen with fury. "Aizen?" Chapter 129. "Shatter! Kyoka Suigetsu! Clap, clap, clap!" The sound of applause rang out. Like a ghost materializing out of nowhere, it made every Shinigami present feel their hair stand on end. When they turned toward the source, 3 all-too-familiar figures had appeared in the empty squad barracks corridor, smiling faintly, a smile that was neither wholly a smile nor a frown. In that instant, an indescribable terror dragged everyone down into a claustrophobic deep sea. Pressure and suffocation closed in, and they could not breathe. They all felt it, because the man standing in the center was none other than Aizen, supposedly dead, the one they had just autopsied. How is that possible? Am I seeing things? Wasn't Aizen just autopsied by Captain Retsu Unohana? Even the captains, the elite of the Gotei 13, were reduced to incoherent, terrified children, their eyes filled with horror. What made it worse was that when some looked back at the body beneath the shroud, they discovered in shock that the white cloth covered nothing. The body, the Aizen Zaraki Kenpachi had struck down before them, was gone. It had vanished into thin air. It had exploded under the double impact. A wave of dizziness crashed over them. Suifeng, Byakuya Kuchiki, Zaraki Kenpachi, Toshiro Hitsugaya, those captains who had just attacked Aizen, stood pale and frozen, mouths agape. If even they could not withstand the shock of the truth being exposed, what hope did the lieutenants and seated officers have? Several weaker-minded souls fainted on the spot, their limbs trembling, faces contorted as if they had seen a demon in daylight. The brief exhilaration of rooting out a traitor and crushing a conspiracy evaporated, replaced by the dread of eternal damnation. And at the center of it all was Aizen, whether he was the one who created the illusion of death or had simply appeared without warning, everything was under his control, just like everything he had done over the past 100 years. Aizen! How did you do it? How did you deceive everyone? It was Kyoraku Shunsui who recovered first. He swallowed his fear and demanded answers. Even normally unrestrained Kyoraku could not keep his composure. Aizen answered without provocation, calmly. Captain Kyoraku, first I must correct you. I never intended to deceive anyone. What you and I see are simply different scenes. The tone was matter of fact, as if stating something self-evident. Kyoraku stared, momentarily at a loss for words. Different scenes? What do you mean? Aizen, what are you plotting? Suifeng roared, unable to contain herself. Part of her fury came from being deceived, but deeper was her shame. At that moment, Aizen had been completely undetectable to her. As commander-in-chief of the Onmitsukido, she should have sensed him. She had not. If even a trace of murderous intent had been present, he could have killed any of them in an instant. That realization humiliated her beyond mere betrayal. Aizen glanced at her with indifference and then forbore to look further. To him, the famed commander-in-chief was like a wisp of air. The silent dismissal shredded Suifeng's pride all over again. She raised her hand in a furious motion. The golden bee crest flashed on her right wrist and she bent forward, about to strike Aizen down. A gentle hand pressed her shoulder from behind. Retsu Unohana, calmer than anyone, shook her head and cautioned, Captain Suifeng, we must not act rashly until we understand Aizen's abilities. Otherwise, we will fall into his trap. As she spoke, Unohana's eyes flicked to Aizen's sides. Tosen Kaname and Ichimaru Gin already had their hands on their Zanpakuto hilts. If Suifeng lunged, their blades would be at the ready, able to cut her in two. Jin, how could you be like this? Why have you become Aizen's accomplice? Matsumoto Ranjiku sighed from the crowd. Watching Gin, she felt a painful distance. The memories of starving together in Rukongai, sharing dried persimmons, flashed through her mind. She had never expected to stand on the opposite side of her childhood friend. Oh my, Lieutenant Matsumoto, I have always been like this. You just never understood me, Gin replied with his accustomed smile, utterly unaffected by the hostile looks around him. His flippant ease only fueled hatred and anger. Jushiro Ukitake's face reddened with anger and disappointment as he confronted Aizen. Aizen, you still haven't explained. All of this, especially that vanished body. How did you do it? Aizen met the hundreds of wary, hostile gazes and spoke calmly as he reached for his waist. He drew his Zanpakuto, Kyoka Suigetsu, slowly from its sheath and held it vertically, tipped to the ground. He stroked the blade with his right hand as he spoke. My Zanpakuto, Kyoka Suigetsu, he smiled faintly. Before, I told you Kyoka Suigetsu is a water-type Zanpakuto, disrupting enemies with irregular reflections of mist and currents, causing them to fight among themselves, right? The corner of his mouth curved into an intriguing, sinister arc. Actually, that was a lie. The true ability of Kyoka Suigetsu is absolute hypnosis that dominates the five senses. It can make anything an enemy perceives or sees change according to my will. His gaze swept over their shocked, bewildered faces, and his smile deepened. Don't understand? Simply put, it can make a fly look like a soaring dragon or a swamp into a field of flowers, just like the scene you're about to witness. He paused, the smile fell away, and a sharp edge of coldness flashed in his pupils. Shatter, Kyoka Suigetsu. Chapter 130. From now on, I will stand in the heavens. Shatter, Kyoka Suigetsu. The moment the release command left Aizen's lips, the surrounding air seemed to change. Influenced by some strange force, barely perceptible ripples silently spread through the space. What's happening? At that instant, the corridor, and everyone in it, felt as if the world itself had shifted. Chapter 147, Section 147. Every Shinigami present felt an unprecedented surge of dread. Their hair stood on end. A prickling chill ran through every cell of their bodies. Fear crashed over them like a waking nightmare. We have to stop him. Toshiro Hitsugaya ground his teeth, drawing his Zanpakuto and preparing to release his Bankai. From the side, Kuchiki Byakuya's voice, flat and resigned, said, It's too late to stop Aizen. Sure enough, just as the sense of crisis peaked, a crack like shattering glass echoed through the air. Aizen's voice, low and uncanny, followed it. Shinigami, he intoned. Everything that exists in this world of 960, only survives by mistaking the facts convenient to them for the truth, because if they don't, then there is no reason to live. He held his Zanpakuto in one hand. His Shinigami uniform and captain's haori billowed in a sudden wind. The space around him, like splintered mirror shards, seemed to break apart. Then, he continued, let my Zanpakuto Kyoka Suigetsu reveal the true face of this world. As the words fell, reality and illusion twisted. Beneath the calm, a horrific scene of slaughter was revealed, the kind of hell the Gotei 13's captains had never imagined. How is this possible? Someone whispered. The Gotei 13, the whole Soul Society, destroyed? The thought hung in the air like a knife. Horrific screams ripped through the illusion, driving the atmosphere to a fever pitch. When the fragmented space cleared like a dissolving cloud, the 5th Division's familiar surroundings had vanished. In their place raged a merciless war. Countless Shinigami lay dead, bodies heaped into mountains, blood running in rivulets that dyed the soil of the Seireitai crimson. The warm breeze had been replaced by the metallic tang of blood. Fires licked across the district. Buildings belched black smoke. Hollow flashes lit the sky. Worse still, when they looked toward Sokyoku Hill, the Sokyoku execution platform had been shattered, and atop its ruined surface lay the corpse of the captain commander, executed, apparently in an instant. The captains choked back a collective gasp. No one could accept the image. The captain commander killed on the Sokyoku. Even as their minds recoiled and insisted this had to be false, the scene remained fixed. No amount of blinking or probing with spiritual pressure erased it. It burned into their perceptions. Aizen, what did you do? A voice demanded. I won't believe it. Soul Society crushed by a Rancor. This can't be. Jushiro Ukitake cried, anger and despair mingling, but Aizen's smile, shaded behind his dark-rimmed glasses, never wavered. He ignored Ukitake's blade-like gaze. Captain Ukitake, he said quietly, did I not tell you? What you see now is how the world truly ought to be. I merely projected it forward. This is the course of the future. Unlike the 1,000-year blood war you saw in the review video, it will be the Arankar army led by me that tramples the Soul Society. He did not need to raise his voice. His words sliced through the thick, almost solidified air. They struck their already fraying defenses like a coup de grace. Tsk-tsk-tsk. Ichimaru Jin's soft, mocking voice drifted. His hands were tucked in the sleeves of his captain's haori as he watched the others panic exactly as Aizen had predicted. The words acted like a fuse, igniting the Shinigami's suppressed fury. I don't care about 5 senses hypnosis, or whatever this nonsense about reality and illusion is, a wild figure snarled. Zaraki Kenpachi stepped forward, removing his eye patch. A pillar of golden reiatsu erupted from him. His aura surged to its peak as he bellowed, Aizen, if I can kill you once, I can kill you twice. With a bestial roar, Kenpachi swung his Zanpakuto in a downward slash. A torrent of golden sword pressure swept forward, obscuring Aizen and his 2 companions. This was a full-strength Kenpachi strike, powerful enough that, had it hit, half the 5th Division barracks would have been leveled. Yet even as the pressure bloomed and bathed his face and haori in brilliant light, Aizen's smile only deepened. There was almost pity in it. Zaraki Kenpachi, Aizen said. Bravery and confidence are admirable, but mere bluster only highlights your weaknesses. Do you really believe the thing you are slashing at is me? His smile turned eerie. In an instant, Kenpachi's pupils constricted and he cried out in horror. When did this happen? He realized with a cold shock that the 3 he had targeted were gone. Where Aizen and his group should have stood were the hundreds of executive militia who had been patrolling nearby. Kenpachi had not struck Aizen at all. He had slashed into his own people. It's too late to withdraw my blade. Kenpachi's face went pale. The executive militia seemed still trapped in the hypnosis, unawakened. Driven by inertia, Kenpachi's slash could not be stopped. It struck true. Boom. The explosion of golden reishi rocked the ground. Hundreds of executive militia were blown apart. Blood spouted in fine arcs. Even Kenpachi's fierce face was sprayed crimson. He stood there, frozen, the animal fury that defined him snuffed out, hollowed. Oh my, as expected of the king of basic attacks, killing hundreds of comrades with a single slash. Only you could do something like that, Ichimaru drawled sardonic. As if to punctuate the moment, a long white cloth spun into being in Ichimaru's hand. It wrapped around him, Tosen Kaname and Aizen. "This is Senkei Hakujo," someone cried. "Aizen, where do you think you're escaping to?" Kyoraku Shunsui roared. "Do you really need to ask?" came the cool reply. Just before the white cloth closed completely, Aizen shot a sideways glance at the transparent light screen not far away and said coldly, "Didn't the review video already tell you the answer?" The cloth enveloped them, and the three vanished from sight, teleported to the preset location, precisely where Aizen had fled to in the review video, Sokyoku Hill. Chapter 31, The Captain Commander's Pursuit, The Clash of Shinigami Peaks. When the last wisp of white fabric faded, Aizen and his two companions had already warped away, leaving behind a barracks half destroyed by sword pressure and a cohort of powerful Shinigami still trapped under Kyoka Suigetsu's five senses hypnosis, their mental defenses crumbling. "Damn it," Suifeng murmured, eyes bloodshot. She stared at the hundreds of corpses nearby, her expression a bitter mix of grief and rage. Hatred toward Aizen had not once been her deepest feeling. Most of their interactions had been brief, deceptions on a personal scale. But when his trick cost the lives of hundreds of executive militia, the wound became a blood feud. Those dead were not faceless pawns. They were the Onmitsukido's finest. Many of them Suifeng's trusted subordinates who had followed her for 10, 20, even more decades. The betrayal tasted of iron and ash. Chapter 148, Section 148. Watching all of her subordinates die before her eyes, Suifeng felt her heart bleed. Hatred clouded her vision. She loathed Aizen with an intensity that burned through her. "Captain Suifeng, I'm so sorry. Believe me or not, Captain Kenpachi never meant to do this." Ikkaku and Yumichika Ayasagawa exchanged a pained look and spoke with heavy remorse, forcing their words through the suffocating despair. They knew Kenpachi would never defend himself. To prevent a rift, so that the 2nd and 11th Divisions would not become mortal enemies, they had to set the record straight. "I know. You don't have to." Even amid overwhelming grief, Suifeng held on to whatever rationality she had left. She bit back a shout, lifted her head, and with bloodshot eyes said, "I'm not blaming Kenpachi. He, like the rest of us, was manipulated by the five senses hypnosis. The one who truly deserves death as atonement is Aizen." At the name, murderous intent exploded in Suifeng's gaze. If she had the chance, whatever the cost, she vowed she would make Aizen pay with his life. But it was too late for wishes. At that very moment, the Aizen trio had already reached Sokyoku Hill, in the footage playing out before them. In the recording, the future Aizen had the Hogyoku in hand. He watched the vortex-like wound on Kuchiki Rukia's chest close rapidly the second the Hogyoku left her spirit body. Even removing the Hogyoku from a spiritual body doesn't harm the soul itself. Truly a clever technique, Aizen murmured. For a heartbeat, a subtle, hidden motion flickered across his dark eyes. Admiration for Urahara Kisuke's workmanship, and beneath that, a thread of envy. The real-world Aizen watched the scene with equal attention. "Jin, next it's your turn to kill Kuchiki Rukia. Once that's done, the anti-escudo should descend," he said, expression unreadable. With events proceeding exactly as he had foreseen, defection was merely a formality. Even if the Gotei 13's strongest rushed to Sokyoku Hill the moment they broke free of the five senses hypnosis, they would probably be too late. Ichimaru Gin, lounging and composed, teased lightly, "Captain Aizen, you do love handing me all the dirty work, don't you?" At the 5th Division earlier, captains had been cautious around Aizen. Gin's carefree manner contrasted sharply. Aizen ignored the taunt and kept his gaze fixed on the transparent screen, watching his future self play out the escape. After the Hogyoku was secured, the future Aizen ordered coldly, "Now that the Hogyoku is in hand, kill her, Gin." "Oh dear, Kuchiki Rukia," Jin intoned mockingly. "I have a fine relationship with your foster brother, Byakuya, but since Captain Aizen orders it." He smiled and drew his Zanpakuto. "Shinso. Shinso. Shoot!" Gin commanded. A white streak of light, sharp as lightning, sped forward. In less than a tenth of a second, it was nearly through Rukia's form. Then wind whipped through the air. Figures appeared on Sokyoku Hill like springing shadows. So the Gotei 13's pursuers have arrived after all," Aizen said, eyes brightening as he watched the screen. "Don't move, Aizen." A precise, urgent shout cut through the bleakness. Two figures flashed out, one left, one right, blocking every escape route. A sword pressed to Aizen's neck, an iron hook restrained his body. His movement was suddenly restricted. Yorichi Shihoin has come as well? The Ryoka invasion was indeed tied to Urahara, Aizen observed without surprise. A feigned apology came from Ichimaru Gin. Oh dear, Captain Aizen, it seems I not only failed to kill Rukia, but Ranjiku has me subdued. The camera swung and Ranjiku Matsumoto materialized behind Gin, her golden hair flicked and her blade at his throat. On the other side, Tosen Kaname was restrained by his vice-captain Hisagi Shuhei and other arriving Shinigami. In moments, the trio who had been poised to flee were all brought under control. So that's how it ends, Aizen said flatly. It seems the final act of defection is nothing more than a replay of the 5th Division's scene. Hardly thrilling. Not exactly. Jin glanced toward the 1st Division. Captain Aizen, the captain commander, wasn't in the 5th Division earlier. Perhaps he still doesn't know you were toying with those Shinigami. But Aizen cut him off, turning his head toward an empty space to his left. No, you're wrong, Gin. He's already here, Aizen said. At the center of his sight, the figure appeared, the captain commander himself. His cane struck the stone hard, and his perfectly controlled face was charged with murderous intent. The arch-criminal, Aizen Sosuke, he roared. With me here, you three will not escape the Soul Society. The captain commander's howl struck like a furnace, and the air on Sokyoku Hill seemed to ignite. For the first time, the two greatest Shinigami of the Gotei 13 faced each other directly. The heat of the captain commander's aged spiritual pressure rolled across the ground like a tangible inferno. Suifeng felt it wash over her, scorching, overwhelming, and knew the battle's next turn had come. Ichimaru Jin sighed, putting on a show of fear. Ah, so even at the last moment the old man intercepts us. This is really bad. But there was no real fear in his clear blue eyes. Jin wasn't merely acting timid, he was deliberately stoking the flames. He knew Anti-Escudo would arrive soon. Unless the captain commander could decisively use his Bankai, it would be nearly impossible to defeat and detain the three of them in Soul Society within the available time. Still, Jin had a contingency of his own. If the captain commander truly unleashed Bankai and managed to pin Aizen down, then, when the killing opportunity presented itself, Gin would not hesitate to use his Bankai as well. He would stab Aizen from behind and end it. That was why he deliberately taunted the captain commander. Yamamoto Genryusai, Gin drawled. To sense our arrival right after we landed and rush straight to Sokyoku Hill, you really do live up to the name of Gotei 13's captain commander. A bed of scorching spiritual pressure wind blew against his face, mussing his bangs, but Aizen's expression remained a faint, composed smile. The same smile he'd always worn during captain's meetings. Yamamoto's voice, however, snapped with fury and disappointment. Aizen Sosuke, the captain commander thundered, you've deceived me. I never thought you would be so treacherous and cunning. Once, like Kyoraku Shunsui and Jushiro Ukitake, Yamamoto had admired Aizen. He had set him up as an example for younger Shinigami. Remembering Aizen's past duplicity, his lies and pretense, only fueled the commander's rage. His anger poured out like oil on a blaze, and with it came the ancient incantation that had shaken the three realms not long before. All things in the universe, turn to ash, Ryujin Jaka! Wood chips exploded from the staff in his hands with a deafening roar. A pillar of crimson spiritual pressure erupted from his aging body like a mushroom cloud, lighting the sky of Soul Society brighter than it had been in years. Aizen, usually unmoved by most displays of power, allowed a flicker of satisfaction to cross his face. For over 100 years, Aizen had manipulated the Gotei 13 with little effort. Facing ordinary Shinigami no longer gave him any thrill. Yamamoto, however, the Shinigami famed as the strongest in 1,000 years, was different. Prodding and enraging him was one of the few pleasures Aizen still enjoyed. Still unmoved even after seeing me release my power? Yamamoto bellowed, flames licking the air as he drove Ryujin Jaka forward. A crimson tornado of fire sliced across Sokyoku Hill, aimed straight at Aizen's spot. Arrogant? I don't think so. Aizen's lip curled in a cool retort even as the tornado grew. Entrenched in past glories, bound by a millennium of false peace, sinking deeper into decay while believing you alone bear the burden, that is your greatest weakness, Yamamoto Genryusai. Aizen's voice carried the absolute confidence that had become his trademark. As Yamamoto prepared another strike, the air suddenly rang with a different incantation. Bakudo number 81, Danku. A massive transparent barrier flashed into being and intercepted the flame tornado, buying Aizen a narrow opening. Calm as ever, Aizen stepped through that gap and slipped away. Yamamoto's sweeping slash tore through where he had been, finding only empty air. Humph. Aizen, are you afraid of me? Yamamoto demanded as he readied another blow. But Aizen interrupted him, voice flat and composed. No, not fear. The time has come. Yamamoto's expression shifted. He had expected Anti-Escudo to arrive eventually, but not this quickly. He gathered every ounce of spirit energy he had left. Ryujin Jaka, Shokaku. He unleashed his full spiritual pressure into a single tremendous slash, the strongest he had used in 1,000 years. A rotating, tornado-shaped wall of flame, it burned and tore across Sokyoku Hill, aiming to cut Aizen down and completely detain him. Just then, a strange smile crossed Aizen's face. Goodbye, Yamamoto Genryusai, he said softly. Next time we meet, we'll be on the battlefield in Karakura Town, won't it? Above Sokyoku Hill, the clouds split as 3 hazy yellow beams of light descended exactly as Aizen had predicted. They enveloped him, and with the arrival of Anti-Escudo, the flaming tornado inexplicably passed through Aizen's form, tearing Sokyoku Hill in two as it went. Aizen stepped into the light. Yamamoto's face tightened in fury. He realized then that he was outmatched by the speed of the interference. As Aizen rose on the fractured stone fragments, he removed his black-rimmed glasses. The frames shattered into dust with a faint snap as he brushed his messy bangs back. Somehow his hair slicked as if by its own will, and revealed his true face, cold, handsome, and utterly composed. No one has stood in the heavens from the very beginning, he intoned, letting the words carry through every corner of the Soul Reaper world as the cameras recorded. But from this moment, the vacancy of the heavenly throne will end. From now on, I shall stand in the heavens. Aizen stood with his hands behind his back, regal and unconcerned, his face magnified across screens and seen by every viewer. The image, his arrogant posture, the cool, unshakable words became an indelible picture that struck deep into hearts and minds throughout the world. In Las Noches, the Arrancar watched the scene unfold. When they saw Aizen ascending into the Garganta, ready to disappear, the stronghold erupted. Damn it, Yami yelled from a cracked corner of the fortress. Those useless Gotei 13, they failed to stop him. We watched Aizen's betrayal unfold, and they still couldn't prevent it. Even among the Arrancar and the pure-blooded Quincy, rage and disbelief flared. The Gotei 13's sudden appearance on Sokyoku Hill had at least delayed Aizen and his two companions, but it hadn't been enough. As Aizen vanished into the passage beyond, the truth was bitterly clear. The escape had succeeded, and a new, terrifying chapter was beginning. Chapter 150. Section 150. At that moment, Yami literally leapt to his feet. He wanted nothing more than to become the Shinigami's biggest fan and shout from the rooftops for them to bring Aizen to justice. The more he hoped, the deeper his disappointment when, in the end, no one could stop Aizen. He managed a grand exit after showing off. It was infuriating. The Shinigami are useless, Noitra snarled. They were played by Aizen the whole time, and he even rode on their heads to gloat. It's enough to make you sick. His eyes burned, and his fist tightened around his crescent scythe, veins standing out from the strain. The rage coiled inside him like a powder keg. Hold on, Sayalaporo interjected. He stuck out his crimson tongue, eerily licking the corner of his mouth. Don't be so down. Remember, this damning footage showed the original timeline. With that recap video appearing, the present timeline might have changed. Changed how? Grimjo asked, frowning. Is there a chance Aizen has already been subdued? Sayalaporo asked, almost gleeful. Once the betrayal was exposed, and the Gotei 13 had real-time guidance from the recap, they wouldn't be fooled by Aizen again. Surely not. If the Gotei still couldn't catch him after that, then they'd be the real fools. Sayalaporo's voice rang through the empty inner hall, carried on the air to every Arrancar. Instantly, their eyes brightened. He could be right. Aizen might already be arrested under trial, locked away somewhere. The gloomy atmosphere in Las Noches lifted as if a cloud had passed, and hope filled the room. Yes, Grimjo said, standing. His fangs showed between his lips, radiating wild confidence. "It's over. Farewell, Aizen. Farewell, your cage." For a fleeting 3 seconds, the Arrancar rejoiced in victory. Then the main gate of Las Noches blew open. 3 figures stepped through slowly, like nightmares walking in from the outside. The applause that followed shattered the newfound hope. Clap! 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 The sound echoed across the hall, and a voice they'd just heard a moment before spoke plainly. "Saya Laporo, I truly didn't misjudge you. Your deduction was flawless." "Too bad," the voice continued. "Even with the recap video, the Gotei 13 still couldn't keep me in Soul Society." Aizen stood with his hands clasped behind his back, entering the hall with ice-cool composure. Behind him, Ichimaru Gin smiled with slitted eyes, and Tosen Kaname looked solemn. For a second, it was like a conjuring trick. The trio that had vanished into a garganta in the video now stood there in the flesh as if they'd stepped out of the screen. The vast inner hall fell silent and went cold. Every Arrancar trembled as if struck, faces frozen in the same stunned horror. "Holy crap," someone blurted. Aizen?" another choked out. The usually emotionless, remorseless Arrancar reacted like frightened children. Even the 4 strongest Vasto Lord were frozen, Stark silent, Baragan terrified, Halibel unreadable, and only Ulquiora's emerald eyes holding their usual icy calm with barely a flicker. The vocal ones from before, Yami, Grimjo, Neutra, were suddenly mute, their bodies shaking with fear. Ichimaru's lips curved into a mocking smile at the sight. "Captain Aizen, why do I feel like the Arrancar aren't thrilled to see us return?" "They're not pleased to be invaded," Tosen said flatly, one hand on his Zanpakuto. He drew his blade with a dull shimmer and stood in the doorway, pointing it imperiously at the Arrancar army. "Anyone who harbors thoughts of rebellion will be killed without mercy." In that moment, Tosen was not the former captain of the 9th Division, nor merely the hated traitor of the Gotei 13. He stood as the general commander of Hueco Mundo, a position that outranked even the Espada. And Aizen had shed his Shinigami facade entirely. Abandoning his old identity, he had become the true Lord of Hueco Mundo. Chapter 134, Time Loop, The Truth from 100 Years Ago. 5th Division. More than half the buildings were badly damaged. The fires set off by the explosive sword pressure had finally been put out by the Shinigami, but the shadow of betrayal still hung over the Seirete. The suddenness of the event and the unexpected identities of the 3 traitors left most Shinigami numb even after the recap footage on the transparent screen had ended. Hinamori Momo was the most devastated. She had admired Aizen deeply. Standing at the door of the squad office, as if someone had emptied her of thought, she stared toward the place where the 3 Garganta had closed above Sokyoku Hill. Her face was pale and pained, as if grieving another life. "Captain, Aizen!" she whispered, as if searching for a reply from the past. "Momo, wake up. Stop being so deluded," Toshiro Hitsugaya said with a pained sigh, frustrated by her denial. "The Captain Aizen you knew was a role he played. From now on, there is only the criminal Aizen." His words were sharp, but Momo seemed to hear them only as noise. Her beautiful face remained lost and forlorn. The Shinigami around them exchanged helpless looks and gave up trying to reason with her. For Momo, the wound in her heart would not heal quickly. The scar left by this betrayal would take a very long time to fade. Chapter 151, Section 151. "Aizen! Lord Aizen! Welcome back to Las Noches!" When it finally registered that what stood before him was real, the Arrancar, led by Zamari, fell to one knee in fanatic devotion. Their absolute loyalty was on display. Aizen surveyed the ruined halls of Las Noches with a cool, detached gaze. Cracks and smashed architecture testified to the Espada's recent mental collapses. A strange glint passed through his eyes. From a single look, he pieced together what had unfolded here. The Espada, each nursing their own schemes, plotting rebellion, attempting ambushes. Yet to Aizen, it barely registered. The Arrancar had always been mere stepping stones on his ascent to a throne. His footsteps rang sharply in the vast inner hall as he strode toward the highest dais. Arrancar watched with a mixture of fear, dread, and ecstatic worship as he took the throne. He settled into it with the same effortless nobility he always wore, resting his head on his hand and smiling with a charmingly sinister curl. "Now everything returns to order," he said lightly. "Let us continue this assessment of my power, And will the secret of Kyokasui Getsu finally be revealed? The hall stiffened. At the mere mention of Kyokasui Getsu, a wave of horror tightened every face. Aizen's name and his Zanpakuto's secret were not to be trifled with. No one dared think of ambushing him anymore. Silence pressed down. Only Aizen, languid on his throne, and Gin Ichimaru and Tosen Kaname standing like sentinels below, and a multitude of trembling Arankar. At that moment, the transparent screen that had gone dark when the previous assessment ended flickered violently. A new scene came alive. "Oh," Jin drawled, hands hidden in his sleeves as he lounged against the throne's base. "Captain Aizen, this one looks different from before." The first image was not a battleground at all, but a swinging clock. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Its measured rhythm dragged listeners back into time, and the sight made Aizen frown. "If I'm not mistaken," he mused, "the next segment won't be the future, but the past." A strong intuition told him the secret to be unveiled this time would be something from his past. Ichimaru's lazy smile widened when he looked up. "Captain Aizen," he teased with mock sympathy, "the video's creator is ruthless. If they keep digging like this, you'll have no secrets left." Aizen said nothing, his gaze locked on the screen, anticipating what past truth might be exposed next. His mind went straight to the Vizord, the captains he had framed, the ones who fled in disgrace. The secret of that night was known, at most, to 3 in the Gotei 13. The clock faded. The scene changed to a moonless night sky, thick with oppressive silence that made every nerve taut. "Tosen Kaname, what have you done?" a voice demanded, stunned and accusing. "Why did you draw your sword against us? Why betray the Gotei 13? Shock and disbelief shattered the night. The camera panned to a figure sprawled in a pool of blood, a blade wound in his back. The number 5 on his captain's haori clear for all to see. Faces in Las Noches shifted at once. At the moment of Aizen's betrayal, the number had been 5, but the man wearing that haori now was not Aizen. It was Hirako Shinji. Chapter 135. "You misunderstood. He has always been loyal," flashed briefly. An accusation, a caption, a piece of the replay. Whispers ran through the Arankar ranks. Though this version of the Shinigami wore different clothing than in that final battle, Hirako's distinctive bowl-cut bangs marked him instantly. The crowd's expressions changed again as a cold comprehension spread through them. Hirako and the Vizard, who later confronted the Miracle Man, had been ensnared by Aizen's deception. "Hirako Shinji?" Aizen tilted his head, a faint smile curving his lips. "As I suspected, it seems this assessment will dig up more than the future, secrets from the past as well. Whoever made this assessment," he added, unusual praise threading his voice. "Their methods exceed my imagination." Aizen had been searching for the mind behind the assessment, looking for clues. Yet the footage ran on without interruption and offered no weaknesses to exploit. Gin's eyes glittered. "Yes, Captain Aizen, imagine how furious that band led by Hirako must be, hidden away in Karakura town, watching this now. Their faces must be green with rage." Ichimaru Jin added insult to injury. Hirako Shinji could already picture himself jumping up and cursing in front of that translucent screen back in the human world. Sure enough, everything played out exactly as Gin had predicted. In the Vizard's base on the outskirts of Karakura town, Hirako Shinji's furious shouts nearly blew the roof off the abandoned warehouse. "God damn it!" he roared. "The person who made this video did it on purpose, didn't they? They deliberately want to make me look like a fool." He stamped his foot. "I don't get it. Every time the camera's on me, I either get slapped flat or cut down by a sword. Am I, Hirako Shinji, weaker than everyone else?" Standing before the glowing screen, Hirako, who always called himself a gentleman, was reduced to railing like a shrew. His composure had collapsed. I, the dignified leader of the Vizard, the only person in the Soul Society who once stood above Aizen. Why must this goddamn author make me look weak? It's not fair. It's completely unfair. The rest of the Vizard, though, reacted very differently to Hirako's cries. "Shinji, calm down," Kensei Muguruma urged, eyes damp with excitement. "What matters now isn't whether we get embarrassed in the footage. What matters is that the truth about that night 100 years ago has finally come out. As long as we can prove our innocence, I think Old Man Yamamoto and the Gotei 13 captains will have to feel guilty for what they accused us of back then," Hiyori Saragaki said, her her expression tangled and raw. Hiyori was the most emotional of them, the one who hated the Gotei 13 the most. Even seeing scenes where they cooperated in the film didn't lessen the resentment choking her heart. Still, as the footage rewound a century, she couldn't help wanting to reach out to that stubborn, younger version of herself. On the screen, the camera shifted and focused on Tosen Kaname, 100 years earlier. He held a blood-stained Zanpakudo in one hand and peeled a mask from his face with the other. His expression was icy and emotionless, utterly indifferent to Hirako's accusations. "Bastard Tosen," Love Aikawa spat, clenching his teeth. "If he hadn't hit us with his bankai from behind, none of us would have been cut down like that." He said the name of Tosen's bankai, Suzumushi's Enma Korogi, and even now the old ache in his back made itself felt. Unless someone knew Tosen well and took precautions, a split-second lapse in a chaotic fight could let his bankai ambush you. Hirako finally steadied himself. Watching that scene made him wince with reluctant regret. If he'd been more alert to Tosen's possible betrayal, maybe his comrades' fates would have turned out differently. But just as Tosen removed his mask and Hirako's voice of accusation faded, a voice emerged from the nearby bushes, the one that everyone hated. "You've got it wrong, Captain Hirako," a mocking voice said. "There's no betrayal. Kaname, he's always been loyal." The words rang out from the rarely visited thicket beneath the moon. The already deathly stillness grew even more chilling. Then the camera swung, and two figures stepped out of the bushes one after the other. Aizen and a young Ichimaru Gin. That image hit like a 100-million-ton bomb and detonated through the Gotei 13. What? No way. Jin was Aizen's subordinate back then? When he was still so young? In the 1st Division's squad room, incredulous shouts broke out. The captains summoned by the captain commander watched the footage with expressions of stunned disbelief. They had already seen Tosen Kaname, then a mere seated officer 100 years ago, draw his sword against the visored captains. Given the recent defection of the Aizen trio, the current captains had thought themselves prepared for anything. But Ichimaru Gin's appearance, so slight he was even smaller than Toshiro Hitsugaya, with an undeveloped, youthful face, threw everyone into panic. Kyoraku Shunsui wiped sweat from his brow and forced out an awkward laugh from his seat in the left column. "I remember Jin had only just joined the Gotei 13 around that time, right? I didn't expect he'd already gotten involved with Aizen so soon." Kyoraku's comment echoed what everyone was thinking. Even the captain commander hadn't fully known one critical thing. When did Aizen, Gin, and Tosen begin plotting together? A few years ago? A decade? The captains had assumed the secret collusion started at most more than 10 years ago, already scandalous enough. They had never imagined it stretched back a full 100 years. The revelation was absurd, unbearable. They sat in stunned silence as another thought crept like ice through the room, staring at the sinister, knowing smiles on Aizen and the young Gin as they emerged from the bushes. Every captain felt their skin prickle. "Jin." In the right column, Ranjiku Matsumoto's voice cracked. "Why did you do this? What was your purpose in getting close to Aizen?" She looked hollowed out. She couldn't understand why Gin would have become Aizen's accomplice a century ago, back when they'd been drifting in Rukongai, intent on becoming Shinigami simply to escape hunger and misery. Then why help the villain? And why, after being promoted to Soul Reaper captain and enjoying all the honor and comforts, would he betray Soul Society? All these questions nagged at Matsumoto Ranjiku like an unsolvable riddle. She still couldn't accept that the silver-haired boy who had always stood at her side, the one who'd fought off wolves alone to bring her food, could harbor such darkness. So the hollowification incident from 100 years ago, Hirako Shinji and the others were truly wronged. Retsu Unohana sighed, heavy with remorse. By the time the Gotei 13 reinforcements arrived at the scene, the visored, whose souls and minds had been ravaged by their first hollowification, had already devolved into something neither human nor hollow. Faced with that unprecedented emergency, and with the Gotei 13's ingrained fear of Menos Grande, the hollowified captains had been treated as fallen Menos Grande. Now the truth lay bare. Seeing the tragic images of those former comrades from a century ago, each collapsed in pools of blood after Tosen Kaname's ambush, not only Unohana, Kyoraku Shunsui, and Jushiro Ukitake, but even the captain commander lowered his eyes, his gaze heavy with guilt and apology. No, someone murmured. You've forgotten 3 others. Kuchiki Byakuya lifted his chin and with righteous indignation spoke 3 names. Urahara Kisuke, Tessai Tsukabishi, and Shihoin Yoruichi. 100 years ago, Kuchiki Byakuya had been a sheltered young nobleman, living a cloistered life in the Kuchiki estate. But that year's incident had shaken the Gotei 13 to its core. Even the head of the Shihoin had vanished overnight. The Kuchiki and Shihoin families had been allies for generations, and the young Byakuya had repeatedly tried to uncover the truth. At one point, he had even foolishly wanted to clear Yoruichi's name. Now, 100 years later, the wrongful verdict was finally exposed, and Byakuya's thoughts immediately turned to Yoruichi and the shopkeeper. Yes, Captain Kuchiki is right. We wronged far too many good people back then. We were failures. Jushiro Ukitake said, voice thick with regret. He was perhaps the kindest of the captains. Imagining Urahara Kisuke and Tessai's arrest, how under Central 46's supposed impartial judgment they were left powerless to defend themselves, filled Ukitake with shame. He felt almost too mortified to remain. The heavy sorrow, however, was cut through by Nemu Kurotsuchi's cold sarcasm. Heh. Captains, this isn't a self-criticism session or a Let's Mourn Soul Society pageant, she said. Instead of uselessly beating yourselves up here, focus on the inventory footage. We need to find the secret of Kyoka Suigetsu. Don't forget, its 5 senses hypnosis made you all dance to its tune. Nemu showed no deference and scorned the captain's remorse. The captain commander inclined his head slightly in agreement. Captain Mayuri is right. Time can't be rewound, and the mistakes we made are now immutable facts. Let go of past struggles. We must focus on how to deal with Aizen. At the sound of Aizen's name, a chilling killing intent flashed through the captain commander's weathered eyes. He had not regretted withholding Bankai at Sokyoku Hill. Using it casually could have trapped Aizen, but at the cost of irreversible damage to Seirete. The priority now was finding any way to break the 5 senses hypnosis. That was why they watched the inventory video. That was their only objective. The footage continued. Aizen, is it really you? Hirako Shinji gritted his teeth. Aizen stood before the pool of blood, cold and emotionless behind his glasses. Hirako, already gravely wounded and barely able to lift his head, spat through the pain. Isn't it obvious? Aizen, who did you think you could hide it from? Aizen replied without expression. When did you realize? Hirako let out a crooked laugh, and his next line stunned everyone watching. Even on the verge of death, with consciousness ready to slip away, he still radiated the rogue bravado that marked him different from other captains. Of course, from when you were still in your mother's womb. The captains were left speechless. They stared at the transparent screen, some giving an involuntary thumbs up to the insolent dying captain. Even Nemu's face froze. She had not expected Hirako to be so bold. He had been Aizen's direct superior, and the one man in the world who dared to insult him in his dying moments. Aizen merely smiled faintly. Interesting, he said. Quarreling about words is pointless, Captain Hirako. Tell me instead how you tried to guard against me. Hirako shoved up from the pool of blood, anger sharpening his voice. Don't use that hypocritical tone, Aizen. I realized long ago you were dangerous and untrustworthy. That's why I made you lieutenant of the 5th Division. I kept you close to watch you. And you think that mattered? Aizen's smile widened, infuriatingly gentle. No, Captain Hirako. It wasn't you who chose me. Hirako bristled. What? It was I who chose you. Aizen's expression returned to its usual composed benevolence, the smile like that of a devoted lieutenant, and yet the eyes remained cold and void. The dissonance between the 2 facets of his face made everyone's skin crawl. That smile, Hiyori Saragaki snapped, clenching her fists. Every word she spat carried the raw rage of a child who had lost a parent. That false, poisonous smile deceived every one of us back then. Kensei, you had it worse than most. Kensei Mugaruma exhaled heavily. He had been the first ambushed and hollow-fied. The chain reaction sprang from that. As the footage dragged his memories back 100 years, guilt and regret swelled in the muscular captain's chest. Hirako shrugged off the sympathy with a lopsided grin. Ah, come on. I even insulted Aizen. I clearly won that round. The video kept playing. Chapter 154. Section 154. Aizen's face wore a gentle smile, but his voice was razor-sharp, deliberately designed to provoke. "Captain Hirako," he said, "thanks to your constant suspicion and distrust of me, you never realized that for the past month, the person who had been following you was actually not me." He reached for his sash just as he had in the 5th Division, drawing his Zanpakuto, Kyoka Suigetsu, and holding it reversed in front of him. His voice dropped to a cold, measured tone. "My Zanpakuto Kyoka Suigetsu," he intoned. "It can force an enemy to perceive any change in this world as I desire. With this complete hypnosis, I can control everything at will." There was no fanfare in his words, no arrogance, only a clear, clinical explanation that doubled as a mockery of Hirako Shinji's self-righteousness. Complete hypnosis? Hirako's expression froze. His eyes widened. Before he could form a reaction, Aizen went on, his tone cutting. "Captain Hirako, you are undeniably perceptive," Aizen said. "But if you had been as close to me as the other captains, perhaps you might have seen through my disguise. Instead, because you didn't trust people, you kept your distance and never let me in. You failed to notice the subtle differences in details, habits, and behavior. You never realized that the me following you had long been replaced. From the beginning, it was I who chose you." Each sentence landed like a blade. The revelation hit Hirako Shinji like thunder, echoing through the Soul Society. In the 1st Division's squad room, cold breaths puffed in the air as the captains exchanged stunned looks. Fear and shock showed plainly in their eyes. The implications were terrifying. Beyond Aizen's overwhelming power as a Shinigami and Kyoka Suigetsu's 5-sense hypnosis, he had mastered every nuance of a person's psychology, thoughts, behaviors, and daily habits. He combined brute strength with a strategist's mind. He played with people's heads. Silence fell like a curtain. The previous anger at seeing Aizen on the screen drained away, replaced by a deeper, colder dread. Even the captain commander and the other captains seemed momentarily speechless, their faces unreadable. If, before seeing this footage, any of them had considered that Aizen succeeded only because of their own carelessness, such comforting thoughts were instantly crushed. Aizen's cunning, depth, and mastery were unparalleled. Compared to Ryujin Jaka's ultimate destructive power or the Yhwach monk's rule-based mastery, Aizen's unseen control was far worse. Do we have another Aizen hidden somewhere in the Gotei 13? Kyoraku Shunsui muttered, trying to break the mounting tension with a half-joke. His attempt only earned him sidelong glances and nervous scrutiny from the others. Everyone felt suddenly suspicious of everyone else. Anyone could be an imposter, and the room brimmed with unease. Then, in the video, as the visored's holofication powers flared, the moonlit night was pierced by a whoosh. Without warning, a figure in a black cloak appeared behind Aizen and slashed. The attack severed the squad emblem on Aizen's arm in one precise stroke. "Urahara Kisuke?" the captains exclaimed in unison. It was him, Urahara, moving like a ghost. Kyoraku let out a relieved breath. If Urahara hadn't arrived when he did, Hirako and the others would have been finished. Yet even as he breathed easier, a guilty memory surfaced. Urahara later endured the harshest judgment from the Central 46. In retrospect, the ruling and their own actions then were regretful. "Look," Toshiro pointed out. "Isn't that the same kind of black cloak Urahara and the others were wearing when Aizen and his group revealed themselves in the 5th Division?" "Yes," someone answered. "It is." It clicked for the captains. Those cloaks, able to block spiritual pressure, came from the Technology Development Bureau, the gear Urahara once made and had access to as its founder. If Urahara defected, Aizen could have slipped into the bureau and taken a supply of those cloaks. That explained how Aizen managed to hide in the 5th Division's underground room and go undetected. The cloaks masked Reiatsu. In other words, Urahara's stolen cloaks had been a crucial enabling factor in Aizen's grand deception and eventual escape to Hueco Mundo. The realization made some of the captains' expressions twitch. Urahara, the perennial troublemaker, now bore at least part of the blame. The night in the footage was cold and quiet, only the wind in the trees. Urahara and Tessai confronted Aizen, who finally confessed to instigating the holofication experiment. As the three prepared to leave, Aizen struck back. The great Taoist unleashed a flying dragon strike, an earth-shaking thunder cannon, but Aizen stopped it with a Danku barrier. no incantation required. That encounter, a century old, ended with Aizen and the others vanishing into the night. To already have the power of a Shinigami at its peak, yet remain composed and disguised for 100 years. Aizen is a terrifying monster, someone whispered. Watching the footage left the captains unknowingly damp with sweat. Aizen's betrayal, his flawless disguises, and his terrifying strength even a century ago struck at the very core of their pride and security. Kyoraku rubbed his chin, a thought forming. So besides the Visored and Urahara and his group, Aizen didn't pick off anyone else in the last 100 years, did he? He looked around at the unchanged role of captains since the holification incident. The personnel shifts had been limited. It suggested Aizen hadn't interfered with other positions. No. He shook his head, the question hanging unanswered in the silent room. Chapter 155, Section 155, Suifeng said decisively, in the past few decades, besides the previous Kenpachi who was killed by Zaraki Kenpachi, there was one other person who mysteriously disappeared. Who? Her words instantly piqued everyone's curiosity. Shiba Ishin, the former captain of the 10th Division, Toshiro Hitsugaya and Matsumoto Ranjiku's former superior. You two, I'm not wrong, am I? As she spoke, Suifeng turned to look at the two captains of the 10th Division in the right-hand row. Both had frozen when they heard the long-unheard familiar name. A nostalgic look crossed Matsumoto Ranjiku's face. After a moment's silence, she nodded, her expression complicated. Yes, Captain Suifeng is right. About 20 years ago, during an unauthorized investigation into the human world, Captain Shiba suddenly disappeared one rainy night. There has been no news of him since. I once thought he was dead, but during Urahara Kisuke's previous review, Captain Shiba appeared again. He even fought alongside Yorichi and Urahara Kisuke. She swallowed hard, then continued with measured gravity. Especially after watching that last review, I have reason to suspect his disappearance back then wasn't natural. It's highly likely it was due to persecution by Aizen. The remark landed like a thunderbolt, and the squad room erupted. What? Shiba Ishin was a victim too? That bastard Aizen! How many innocent people did he ruin? The captains reacted strongly. Shiba Ishin's tenure had been brief, and his successor, Toshiro Hitsugaya, had distinguished himself, so the name Shiba Ishin had faded from memory. Many captains had only a hazy recollection of him. If Matsumoto hadn't mentioned him, some might have struggled to remember he even existed. At that moment, the interrupted footage resumed. The screen flickered to a new scene. A dull clap of thunder rolled, and mottled raindrops smeared the lens. The desolate night, struck by a sudden downpour, felt eerie and charged. The captains narrowed their eyes. The background was unmistakable, Karakura Town. But this was not the later, final battle with the Arankar. The camera captured another moment. Tsk, tsk, a familiar Kyoto accent drawled. Captain Aizen, Shiba Ishin has already released his Shikai. If we keep standing by, Hollow White will be suppressed. The captains frowned. That's Ichimaru Gin's voice? No way. Could Matsumoto be right? Had Shiba Ishin disappeared because Aizen targeted him? The camera swung toward the voice and answered. The three figures who had vanished into the night at the end of the previous review were now facing the review camera. Aizen's trio, unmistakable. Oh my god, those black cloaks again? Seeing Aizen, Ichimaru Gin, and Tosen Kame in identical black cloaks, the captain's expressions shifted to unease. The cloaks, Urahara Kisuke's invention that could block spiritual pressure, had helped Aizen deceive many. Even the normally composed Captain Commander twitched at the sight. If the earlier review hadn't exonerated Urahara, he might have suspected the man of being an accomplice. Then the camera moved once more. Another figure stepped into frame, and the room fell utterly silent. Black Shinigami uniform, a white captain's haori with the number 10 on the back. Shiba Ishin! So Matsumoto was right. Shiba Ishin didn't vanish on his own. The captains cried out. Matsumoto Rangiku and Toshiro Hitsugaya trembled with emotion. Shiba Ishin stood there in his captain's haori, his zanpakuto, engetsu, drawn in shikai, the blade wreathed in fierce, burning flames. The fire carved through the night, and the scene thrummed with tension. Watching the screen in the Urahara shop, a certain orange-haired boy's reaction was even more extreme than the captain's. Ichigo, who had been sitting cross-legged in front of the translucent screen, stared in disbelief at the sight of his father's captain's Haori. "Oh my God!" he shouted. "Is this real? My dad used to be a Soul Reaper captain?" He turned to look at the bed behind him, where his father lay pale and unconscious, being treated by Yoriichi and Tessai Tsukabishi. Ichigo looked as if he'd seen a ghost. Is this really true?" His tongue seemed tied by shock. No wonder the Quincy King had told him he knew nothing about his origins. So his dad had been hiding it all along. What a conniving, silly guy. Ichigo, hot-headed by nature, cursed quietly at the thought. If Isshin weren't badly injured, he'd have already grabbed him by the collar and demanded answers. Urahara Kisuke watched Ichigo's turmoil and patted his shoulder calmly. "Ichigo, I know you're anxious, but don't get worked up. Let Mr. Isshin recover first." Urahara rubbed his temples. Before treatment, Isshin had explicitly told him not to reveal Ichigo's origins no matter what, unless, as Urahara had guessed, Ichigo later ranked in the top 3 during the reviews. Then, everything would naturally come out when that footage was unveiled. Urahara hadn't expected the footage showing events from 20 years ago to surface this early. It was entirely unexpected. "All right," Ichigo breathed, trying to steady himself as the footage played on and the implications settled over everyone watching. Ichigo wasn't unreasonable. After Urahara Kisuke's persuasion, he sulked for a moment, then sighed. "I don't know why Dad kept it from me," he said, "but maybe he was trying to make my life easier." Before watching the footage, he had been brimming with curiosity about the Soul Reaper world, fired up by all the dazzling abilities. After seeing Aizen's cunning, how he controlled events from the shadows with endless disguises and schemes, Ichigo finally understood. The Soul Society was deep and dangerous, and as a high school kid, he simply wasn't ready for it. "Look," Urahara said, frowning. "Even your father, a powerful captain once, nearly got ambushed by Aizen." The screen split for the first time. On the left, Shiba Isshin, after releasing his Shikai, was fiercely fighting Hollow White, spraying explosions of flame from Zangetsu. On the right, Aizen moved cloaked in black, quietly approaching, like a knife ready to stab from behind. Ichigo's heart thudded. He ground his teeth. Damn it, those 3 old schemers. Aren't they out of line? Isn't there anyone who can stop them? Even though it was only old footage, since it involved his father, Ichigo was completely immersed. As Aizen drew closer, Ichigo grew frantic, wishing he could somehow warn his dad. But it was the past. The moment the thought crossed his mind, tragedy played out. "As expected, you still fear the power of a Shinigami." Aizen's voice was calm. Just as Isshin tried to press his advantage against Hollow White, a flash of light cut through the air behind him, sharp and precise. Zeng, a cold edge, fueled by high spiritual pressure, sliced across Isshin's back, tearing a deep, bloody wound. A terrible cry escaped him. "Ah! Damn it! Who's there? Show yourself!" His roar was raw, but the rain swallowed his voice. The steady downpour soaked Isshin's captain's Haori until it ran crimson. Ichigo felt as if he could see his father's despair even through the screen. Tears prickled at his eyes. "Damn you, Aizen." Ichigo clenched his fists, silently swearing, "If I ever get strong, I'll beat him within an inch of his life." Urahara looked guilty. He lowered his head and sighed. "Ichigo, I'm ashamed to say this. If I had been more careful and taken those black cloaks with me back then, your father might not have ended up like this." From captain to clinic doctor in 20 years, Isshin's fall from grace stung Urahara too. "I'm more worried about how Dad survived that night," Ichigo said, staring at the screen. The footage showed Isshin's momentum collapsing after the backstab. His flames were nearly extinguished. He was driven to the brink. For several minutes, the video recorded a brutal sequence. Isshin getting pushed down, slashed again and again until his Haori was completely soaked in blood. Ichigo's anxiety built. Urahara caught Ichigo's gaze, solemn. "Haven't you always wanted to know who your mother really was?" Ichigo's eyes widened. Could this be connected? In an instant, he put it together. "Urahara-san, did Mom step in when Dad was in danger?" Urahara's face relaxed into a half-smile. "You're as sharp as your father. You might be right." In the recording, Isshin fell among ruined stone, disheveled. Hollow White's arm blade descended, aiming for his head. Whoosh! A streak of light cut through the rainy night, like dawn before sunrise, freezing the blade's motion. Ichigo stared, transfixed. "This is a pure-blood Quincy's technique," he whispered. He'd seen Quincy abilities in other inventories and recognized the light arrow immediately. A Hylig file, a spiritual arrow only a pure-blood Quincy could fire. Could his mother be a pure-blood Quincy? Then another arrow screamed through the air, faster, keener, impacting directly in front of Hollow White. A blinding explosion filled the sky, shaking the camera. The force was enormous. Ichigo felt his chest tighten as if struck. Holy! He was stunned, then electrified with excitement. His mother, Masaki, wielded a Hylic file with such power that it lit the night like a beacon. The light burst forward, turning the hazy, rain-soaked scene into a sudden blaze of hope. Ichigo's pulse raced as the footage replayed the blazing arrow over and over, each replay making her strength more real. He was startled at first, then overwhelmed with pride and awe. She was fierce beyond imagination. His mother was far more formidable than he had ever imagined. It made him even more excited for his mother's upcoming appearance. That's right, Urahara Kisuke said under his olive-green bucket hat, expression complicated. I never imagined Masaki would be so brave back then. To face something that dangerous and still step forward, her courage was remarkable. His eyes never left the figure of Hollow White on the monitor. A human body, a Shinigami-like fighting style, the strength and instincts of a Menos Grande, especially the hollow hole in its chest, forcibly sealed. The thing sent a cold shiver through Urahara. He lowered his head and glanced sideways, and his gaze fell, almost imperceptibly, on Ichigo. Urahara's face tightened as he muttered under his breath. That monster, if not for that recording, it would be nearly impossible to grasp just how powerful and dangerous it was. Figuring out how to handle it going forward is going to be a real headache. As someone who'd been in the loop back then, Urahara knew the whole ugly truth. The creature in the footage, stronger than a Shinigami captain, was sealed inside Ichigo's soul, waiting for the moment it might wake. In other words, a massive time bomb lay buried within Ichigo. If his Shinigami powers reawakened, Hollow White's strength would awaken too. It would keep devouring Ichigo's soul until it consumed everything he was. That was why Isshin had deliberately hidden it and hoped Ichigo would stay an ordinary human. Maybe Urahara hadn't kept his voice quite low enough. They were close, and Ichigo, hearing the tail end, couldn't help blurting, "Urahara Tencho, what do you mean? How to deal with it in the future? Does that mean after this battle, that thing will still be in Karakura town? No way. That's too dangerous." The idea made the hair on Ichigo's neck stand up. If someday, while taking a walk at night, that thing suddenly burst out and slashed him from behind, wouldn't he be finished? Urahara chuckled and tried to ease him. "Ichigo, don't worry. Hollow White was sealed before you were even born. There's no need to panic." Sealed? Ichigo's scowl didn't relax. Why sealed and not killed? Where is it sealed? No matter where, it's still a massive hidden danger. Before Urahara could answer, he diverted Ichigo's attention. Look, the camera's moving. The monitor's view shifted toward the place where the destructive arrow had been fired. A single, bright figure stepped into frame, accompanied by a triumphant fanfare that made the moment feel cinematic. Fair-skinned, golden hair cut in a side part that fell to her shoulders, clad in a form-fitting hooded dress that made her look like an adorable, spirited girl. Yet the way she drew her bow was all cool, heroic precision. The contrast between her youthful appearance and the deadly calm of her movements caught everyone's breath. That frozen image, Masaki Kurosaki, cut through the rainy night silence and sent a ripple through Soul Society. In the first division, Captain stared, stunned. The human world had produced a pureblood Quincy who was not only beautiful but terrifyingly strong. Seeing the chilling, killing intent in her breath conflicted with her youthful visage. It couldn't be hidden. "She's a pureblood Quincy from the human world," someone whispered. "She looks strong." They had never expected such a thing. All their lives, Quincy's had been oppressed by Shinigami. The relationship had been a chain of contempt with Quincy at the bottom. And yet here was a Quincy who disregarded that history and, at the risk of her life, stepped forward to save a Shinigami captain. Even the stoic Captain Commander felt a stir at her unwavering gaze. After driving Hollow White back with 2 consecutive powerful arrows, Masaki drew her spirit energy longbow and strode to the shattered fissure where Shiba Isshin lay. She looked down, concern softening her features. Shinigami, are you all right? The girl adjusted the hood at the back of her dress with a casual flick. In that moment, roles seemed reversed. Masaki the proud, high-toned warrior, Ishin the wounded human. The scene provoked admiration everywhere. On Zaraki Kenpachi's shoulder, Yachiru squealed with delight, waving her arms. Wow, 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 big sword dude, that human sister is amazing. She's like a savior. If it had been me, I don't know that I'd have had the guts to step up like that, Ranjiku admitted, embarrassed. She's worthy of respect, even the usually prickly Suifeng allowed, setting aside her disdain for humans. Of course, praise breeds skepticism too. At Urahara's shop, Ichigo watched the display on the transparent monitor, and after a moment of pride in his mother's valor, couldn't help shooting a resentful look at the sickbed behind him. With a face full of mock indignation, he muttered, "How did a woman as amazing as Mom ever fall for Dad? That shouldn't happen." Once again, Ichigo was acting the self-appointed, complaining son, a familiar routine. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the footage was doing one more thing. It was exposing other truths. In Las Noches' throne room, Ichimaru Gin was openly saying what everyone there had been trying not to acknowledge. The video showed Aizen's treachery, him stabbing Shiba Ishin in the back. This video's author has no sense of mercy, Gin said, voice barely hiding a barb. They actually went and showed the moment you betrayed Ishin. They didn't spare Captain Aizen's reputation at all. The Espada and their subordinates below the throne bristled. Damn it, one spat. Ichimaru Jin, how dare you complain? Thanks to whoever leaked that recording, your skullduggery is out in the open, another snarled. Compared to you three scheming, shameless old men, the mysterious video creator is clearly a light of justice. Below, the Arrancar ranks bristled with contempt at Aizen's actions. If you wanted to fight, do it openly. What was the point of hiding behind black technology and scheming from the shadows? If you had the guts, step out and fight fair. None of them doubted Aizen's strength, but the compilation video had exposed two scenes of his behind-the-scenes plotting: disguise, provocation, psychological warfare, sneak attacks, and the Arrancars who lived and died by direct combat found those methods dishonorable and beneath contempt. Arrancars fought head-on, win and slaughter, lose and accept it. Scheming from behind was boring. Aizen sat motionless on his throne, his head propped on his arm in a posture equal parts languid and aristocratic. Even as murmurs rose from below, his handsome, cold face did not change. His voice, detached and emotionless, carried across the hall. Jin, there is no such thing as honor, he said. In this world, existence is the only justification. Codes of conduct are for the weak who cannot survive without rules. My actions answer to no constraint. The sentence landed like a silencing spell. The Arrancar ranks fell silent. In the footage, the human Quincy girl who had appeared suddenly had repelled Hollow White. Three shadowed figures, one of them Aizen, had quietly turned their attention to Kurosaki Masaki. Not good. She's a pure-blood Quincy, someone warned. She's an unforeseen variable. Eliminate her. Tosen Kaname snarled from beneath his black cloak, about to draw his Zanpakuto, until Aizen's hand landed on his shoulder. Kaname, there's no hurry, Aizen said, preventing the assassination. It's rare to have a Shinigami, a Menos Grande, and a pure-blood Quincy together. This is a once-in-a-lifetime chance to observe. A peculiar gleam flashed behind his lenses. He was curious how Hollow White, the first hollow formed with a Shinigami soul, would fare against a Shinigami captain and a pure-blood Quincy fighting in sequence. Would it be killed on the spot, or would it shed even more power? The answer would serve Aizen's research into hollowification. As Aizen plotted, Hollow White, redirected by Masaki's intervention, swung its arm blade at her. Its black-armored body blazed with feral energy, transforming into a phantom-like blur as it dove from high above with a speed almost impossible to trace. Oh no, Hollow White is too fast. Mom's holy arrows all missed. Ichigo watched the clear screen, sweating. The arm blade had built momentum during its dive. If it struck Masaki's ordinary human body, it would cut her in two. From the sickbed behind him, Ishin Kurosaki's voice came, weary but oddly amused. After treatment, his injuries had improved enough for him to speak. He forced a pale smile. Ichigo, you idiot. If your mother had died that easily, you wouldn't exist. He hesitated, then added, also, don't blink, okay? Your mother's courage is beyond what you can imagine. Then Ishin stopped, offering no more explanation. On the screen, Hollow White's blade descended. Masaki did not flinch. Instead, she extended her arm as if daring the attack, provocative, as though to say, "Come and cut me." Gasps went up from viewers everywhere. "Is she crazy? Is she not afraid of death?" they cried. Only Ishin smiled, proud and nostalgic, as if remembering something long past. Then, at the last moment, her head turned sharply to the left and the blade swung past. The inertia tore into her extended arm, piercing and bleeding it, but Masaki smiled through the pain. With one wounded hand, she seized Hollow White's bull-like helmeted head. "Got it! Now I can finally aim properly." Her eyes were iron. Though her body was fragile, her will burned fierce. With the injured arm, she drew back the bowstring and released a miniature but devastating holy arrow. Like a bolt of lightning, it struck through Hollow White's head. The thing exploded. Ichigo's relief and joy were instantaneous. He threw his head back, chest heaving. "Thank God! Mom and Dad are both safe," he cheered. But the video had another twist. Just as Hollow White's helmeted head blew apart, the hollow accelerated its self-destruction. In the moments before it died, the remnants of its soul and power surged, invading Masaki's body. The camera's close-up captured the entire process. Ichigo's smile froze. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He repeated, each word heavy with shock. "Dad is a Shinigami captain. Mom is a pure-blood Quincy." And Hollow White's power invaded Mom when it self-destructed. He swallowed hard, the truth settling in. "So I, who was born from them both, carry all three of those powers within me, don't I? So, I'm a Triforce being. P.S. I'm not dragging this out on purpose. It's just that Ichigo and Aizen have a lot of overlap. While I explain Aizen, I inevitably expose Ichigo's secrets too. It's like writing about the second and third places at once by intertwining their stories." Chapter 142. Watch out for Aizen. He backstabbed again. Shinigami. Menos Grande. Pure-blooded Quincy. Ichigo stood frozen in front of the translucent light screen like a statue. His handsome, chiseled face was a mask of indescribable confusion, his eyes flickering wildly. He murmured, as if in a trance, "I never imagined. My soul makeup would be this complicated. To have the powers of three major races inside me at once, I'm basically a walking time bomb." In the original timeline, when Ichigo learned everything about his origins from Kurosaki Ishin, he accepted it calmly and didn't dwell on it. But this isn't that timeline. This is a different world line. Here, the original plot hasn't played out. Important events diverged early. Even Kuchiki Rukia was captured by the Arrancar and taken to Hueco Mundo right at the start. As a result, Ichigo's identity hasn't had time to change organically. Aside from learning about the Soul Reaper world and its secrets by watching all those inventory videos, he's still essentially a normal high school student. He hasn't lived through the upheavals that would have toughened him. So when he's suddenly hit with the truth about his origins, his reaction is total bewilderment. His usually driven mind shorts out from the shock. Urahara Kisuke, standing beside him, had clearly anticipated this. He didn't rush to comfort Ichigo. He let him wrestle with his thoughts for a moment. Then a sly smile tugged at the corner of his lips, and he offered an unconventional kind of consolation. "Ichigo," Urahara began, "if I were you, I wouldn't panic. I'd go to the freezer, grab a couple bottles of champagne, and celebrate." He even made an exaggerated please gesture toward the beverage section of the shop, urging Ichigo on. "What?" Ichigo blurted. The suggestion only threw his already chaotic thoughts into more of a tailspin. Open champagne, celebrate? Urahara Tencho, are you deliberately making fun of me now? Who has time to joke when they've just learned they're part Quincy, Hollow, and Shinigami? No, you've got me wrong. I'm not teasing, Urahara said, calmly fanning himself as if he were lecturing on manners rather than cosmic identity crises. Think about it. In the whole Soul Reaper world, aside from you, is there anyone whose soul is infused with the powers of all three lineages? No, there's nobody. And what does that mean? He placed a hand on Ichigo's shoulder and spoke with quiet confidence. It means you're unique, the one chosen, the strongest lineage in the Soul Reaper world. One moment you're sitting in class, and the next you're the sky-favored lucky one. When will you ever get a better reason to pop champagne? Urahara's words came fast and hard, and they had the effect he wanted. Ichigo's blankness cleared. His eyes flared with light. That's right, he said, suddenly bright. Urahara Tencho is right. I have the powers of 3 races. I'm the chosen one, the protagonist. I can rewrite fate. Why am I hesitating? Open the champagne and drink with everyone. Confidence flooded him. The shock was replaced by resolve and a kind of naive heroism. He was now convinced he just needed time to train and grow, and then he'd save the world. Kurosaki Ishin, propped up on the sickbed, watched his son with a twitching mouth. "Good heavens," he muttered. "Urahara Kisuke, you charmer. You really talked Ichigo into embracing his origins with nothing but words. Your talk no jutsu rivals Aizen's." If he didn't know Urahara, Ishin might have worried his son was being conned. But Urahara had a plan, and just then the light screen flickered again and brightened. A new scene unfolded. Blue sky, white clouds, the sound of flames in Karakura town's skyline, buildings scarred and collapsing. It was the Karakura battlefield, but it had jumped ahead to the late stage of the war after many Arrancar had already fallen. In the sky hovered Aizen, Ichimaru Gin, Tosen Kaname, and a lonely Haribel facing 3 foes. The battle had turned catastrophically against Hueco Mundo. It was one-sided. The Gotei 13 was on the brink of final victory. "What?" came the reaction from Las Noches, where the remaining Espada and their Fracción watched the footage in panic. "Only Haribel left? Where are Stark and Baragan? Are they already dead?" The revelation hit the Arrancar hard. Their army, once so terrifying, appeared fragile. The most crushed was Baragan, the so-called Skull Emperor. In Shunsui Kyoraku's inventory files, it had been explicitly suggested that Stark had died in a string of battles, but Baragan had never been shown thoroughly in those inventories. He had been full of confidence, certain of his place. None of them expected such a cruel outcome. The Arrancar forces almost entirely wiped out. Ichimaru Gin drew a thin line with his mouth, frowning outwardly but inwardly satisfied. If the Gotei 13 ultimately prevailed, Aizen would be punished. But Aizen himself watched the same footage without a ripple of concern. He remained composed, arrogant in his calm, as if the whole catastrophe were part of his design. "Jin, don't worry," Aizen said, not with bluster, but with conviction. "Once the Hogyoku is perfectly fused with me, I will, by myself, defeat the Gotei 13. He truly believed it. In fact, the rout of the Arrancar forces was exactly what he had planned. Aizen had never intended to rely on the Arrancar to defeat the Gotei 13. Chapter 160, Section 160. At that moment, the inventory video camera shifted as Aizen's words echoed, finally settling on Haribel's back. A chill of foreboding swept through every Arrancar. Could it mean Haribel was about to be sacrificed? Haribel felt her heart hammer in her chest. Then the next scene unfolded, and it left everyone speechless. Shunpo. Without warning, Aizen, who had been watching the battle, vanished from sight and reappeared behind Haribel, grabbing her waist as if to draw his Zanpakuto. Normally, anyone seeing this would assume he intended to fight at her side. But after the 2 previous scenes, the inventory had revealed Aizen's 2 prior betrayals. The Arrancar froze. The same ugly thought sprang to every mind. That bastard Aizen. Is he going to stab Haribel in the back too? Aizen stepped closer with cold precision. When he finally drew Kyoka Suigetsu, his voice was flat and merciless, and the entire Las Noches felt as if the sky had fallen in. "Haribel, you are useless now." There was no trace of regret on his handsome face. Before anyone could react to the words, his blade flashed in a single sweeping strike. Clang, a white slash cut across the air. Under every eye, a dark wound bloomed on Haribel's slender waist. A backstab. Aizen had done it again. His previous betrayals had targeted the Visorid and the Gotei 13 captains. Now he had turned on one of his own, one of the top 3 Espada. The sight was outrageous, and the shock rippled straight to the Soul Society. Inside the 1st Division headquarters, the captain commander and the Gotei 13 captains watched in stunned silence. Who was Beresor? Haribel was a Vasto Lord, the strongest of Hueco Mundo's life forms, an opponent who, relying on her own might and the ocean-commanding power of the Queen's Embrace, could hold her own against 3 captains at once. Even if the trio fighting her, Toshiro Hitsugaya, Hiyori Sarugaki, and Lisa Yadamaru, were not the strongest among the captains, one Arrancar taking on 3 captains was proof enough of her power. And Aizen's disdainful wound made a mockery of that proof. Toshiro's face soured. Despite the fact that Aizen had struck from behind, the contrast was stark. Here was an enemy who had been reduced to a mere backdrop by Aizen's arrogance. Does he really think he, Ichimaru Gin, and Tosen can fight all of us on their own? He thought, burning with indignation. Shunsui Kyoraku watched with a half-smile. Aizen's strength and intellect were no longer in doubt, but Shunsui still refused to believe that Aizen's trio could truly take on the entire Gotei 13 plus the Visorid. If they actually could, then lawlessness had a new name. The captains, some amused, some contemptuous, inwardly wished Aizen would cut down the two known traitors, Gin and Tosen, just as easily. But in Las Noches, the atmosphere was different, thick with rage and suffocating heat. "Damn you, Aizen! That bastard!" Blood spouted from the wound at Harabel's waist. Her expression, which had earlier been dazed, snapped to fury. Sapphire eyes flared with confusion and blazing anger. She had been fighting with everything she had, ready to give herself up, and yet Aizen had turned his blade on her. The scene detonated like a bomb. Beneath the throne, the Espada and all the Fraction, no longer cowed by Aizen's presence, spun to glare up at him with murderous intent. They wanted an explanation. They wanted him torn down. But the worst was the echo. Even now, the corridor kept repeating Aizen's voice on a loop. "Harabel, you are useless now." The refrain battered their dignity. Resentment and old grievances fused into a red-hot surge of hatred. The Arrancar who had tolerated Aizen's rule until now could no longer contain themselves. They stared up at him as if they would swallow him whole. "Captain Aizen, that was going too far." Ichimaru Gin, noticing the shifting temper, spoke up smoothly, a hand already curled inside his sleeve on the hilt of Shinso. If any hothead made the first move, Gin's extending blade would cut them down in an instant. His voice was a warning, a reminder to their leader. Aizen did not flinch. Still seated, he let a small smile curl at one corner of his mouth, and with that same chilling calm, he began to explain. "All the scenes shown in the inventory video are based on the original world line," he said. "This is no longer the initial world line." The words hit like a cool blade. The Arrancar's faces shifted as the implication settled. Before anyone could finish thinking, one of Las Noches' resident intellects, Hueco Mundo's scientist and the Espada's proclaimed genius, called out sharply, voice edged with suspicion. "Lord Aizen, what do you mean? Are you saying you don't plan to wage war on the Gotei 13 anymore?"